A Room of One's Own. Virginia Woolf. Chapter 1. But you may say, we asked you to speak about women and fiction. What has that got to do with a room of one's own? I will try to explain. When you asked me to speak about women and fiction, I sat down on the banks of a river and began to wonder what those words meant. They might mean a few remarks about Fanny Burney, a few more about Jane Austen, a tribute to the Brontes with a sketch of Haworth Parsonage under snow, some witticisms about Miss Mitford, a respectful nod to George Eliot, a mention of Mrs. Gaskell, and that would be that. But the words weren't so simple. Women and fiction might mean women and what they are like, or women and the fiction they write, or women and the fiction written about them, or perhaps all three mixed together in a way you wanted me to explore. That last idea seemed the most interesting, but it had a fatal flaw. I could never reach a conclusion. I couldn't hand you a nugget of pure truth to tuck into your notebooks and keep forever, which I understand is a lecturer's first duty. All I could offer was an opinion on one small point. A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction. That, as you'll see, leaves the big questions about the true nature of women and fiction unsolved. I've dodged those questions. They remain, for me, unsolved problems. But to make amends, I'll show you how I arrived at this opinion about the room and the money. I'll unfold the thoughts and prejudices that led me to it as freely as I can. Perhaps, if I lay them bare, you'll find something useful about women and fiction. At any rate, when a subject is as controversial as this one, any question about sex is, one can't hope to tell the full truth. All I can do is show how I came to hold this view, letting you see my limitations and quirks so you can draw your own conclusions. Fiction, I suspect, holds more truth than fact here. So, I'll use a novelist's freedom to tell you the story of the 2 days before I came here, weighed down by the subject you gave me, weaving it into my daily life. What I'll describe doesn't exist. Oxbridge is made up, Fernham too, and I is just a handy stand-in for someone with no real being. Lies will spill from my lips, but there might be some truth mixed in. It's up to you to sift through and decide what's worth keeping. If it's all rubbish, toss it aside and forget it. Here I was, then, call me Mary Baton, Mary Seaton, Mary Carmichael, or whatever name you like. It doesn't matter. Sitting by a river a couple of weeks ago in fine October weather, lost in thought. The topic of women and fiction, with all its passions and prejudices, weighed me down. Bushes glowed golden and crimson on either side. Willows wept over the far bank, their hair trailing in the water. The river mirrored the sky, the bridge, the burning trees, and when an undergraduate rode through, the reflections closed behind him as if he'd never been there. You could sit there all day, lost in thought. Thought, though it hardly deserves so grand a name, dropped its line into the stream. It swayed among the reflections and weeds, drifting minute by minute until I felt that little tug, the sudden pull of an idea. But when I reeled it in and laid it on the grass, it looked so small, so insignificant, like a fish a good angler throws back to grow fatter. I won't trouble you with it now, but you might spot it later in what I say. Small as it was, it stirred something exciting in my mind. It darted and flashed, stirring up a rush of ideas so I couldn't sit still. Soon I was striding across a grassy plot until a man's figure rose to block my way. At first, I didn't realize the odd figure in a cutaway coat and evening shirt, waving wildly, was aiming at me. His face showed horror and indignation. Instinct told me he was a beetle, I was a woman. This was the turf, and that was the path. Only fellows and scholars walked here. The gravel was for me. I stepped back to the path, the beetle's arms dropped, his face calmed, and though turf is nicer to walk on than gravel, no great harm was done. The only charge I could level at the fellows and scholars of that college was that, in guarding their turf, rolled smooth for 300 years, they'd scared my little fish back into hiding. What had sent me trespassing so boldly, I couldn't recall, but a peace settled over me as I strolled through Oxbridge's courts and quadrangles on that fine October morning. The ancient halls smoothed away the roughness of the present. My mind, freed from facts, unless I trespassed again, could wander where it pleased. By chance, I recalled an essay about revisiting Oxbridge, bringing Charles Lamb to mind. Among the dead, Lamb feels like a friend. I imagined asking him how he wrote his essays, flawed yet starred with poetry, outshining even Max Beerbohm's perfection. Lamb once came to Oxbridge, maybe 100 years ago, and wrote about seeing Milton's Lycidas asterisk manuscript here. He thought it sacrilege to imagine Milton changing a single word. That sent me guessing which word Milton might have altered and why. Then I realized the manuscript was just yards away in a famous library. I could trace Lamb's steps across the quadrangle to see it, and Thackeray's *Esmond manuscript too. Critics call *Esmond perfect, though its 18th century style feels forced to me. I wondered if the manuscript's changes favored style or sense, a question I couldn't answer without seeing it. But as I reached the library door, a kindly gentleman in a black gown fluttered out like a guardian angel, barring my way. He murmured that ladies needed a fellow's escort or a letter of introduction. That a famous library rejected me didn't faze it. It slept on, treasures locked tight, indifferent to my vow never to seek its hospitality again. Still, an hour remained before lunch. What to do? Stroll the meadows, sit by the river. It was a lovely autumn morning, leaves fluttering red to the ground, no hardship either way. But then music drifted from a chapel, some service underway. The organ's groan sounded more like remembered sorrow than sorrow itself, wrapped in peace. I had no wish to enter, even if I could have, and this time a verger might have demanded my baptismal certificate. The chapel's exterior was as grand as its interior. I watched the congregation buzz like bees at a hive, some in caps and gowns, some wheeled in bath chairs, others crumpled into odd shapes, like crabs in an aquarium. Leaning against the wall, the university felt like a sanctuary for rare types soon to vanish outside its gates. Old tales of deans and dons surfaced, but before I could whistle one into a gallop, the crowd slipped inside. The quadrangle stretched before me, smooth lawns, massive buildings, the chapel a ship forever sailing, never docking. Once this was marsh, I thought, where grasses waved and pigs rooted. Horses and oxen hauled the stones, masons stacked them, painters brought glass, all funded by a steady stream of gold and silver from kings, queens, and nobles. When faith faded and reason rose, the flow continued, now from merchants and industrialists, to build libraries, labs, and gleaming instruments where pigs once roamed. Men with trays bustled about, flowers bloomed in window boxes, gramophones blared. I couldn't help reflecting until the clock struck, cutting my thoughts short. It was time for lunch. Novelists often make lunch parties unforgettable for wit or wisdom, but rarely mention the food, as if soup, salmon, and ducklings didn't matter. I'll break that rules. Lunch began with soles in a deep dish, draped in cream flecked with brown spots. Then came partridges, not just bald birds, but a procession with sauces, salads, thin potatoes, and succulent sprouts. Next, a sugary confection rose before us, too grand to call pudding. Wineglasses flushed yellow and crimson, emptied and filled, lighting a warm glow in the soul, not the sharp spark of brilliance, but the rich flame of easy talk. No need to hurry or dazzle, just be oneself. We were all bound for heaven, with Van Dyck in tow, I thought, sinking into cushions with a cigarette. But then, glancing out, I saw a tailless cat padding across the quadrangle. That sight shifted something in me. Perhaps the hawk was wearing off, but as the Manx cat paused, questioning the universe, something felt missing, different. What was it? I asked, half listening to the chatter. To answer, I recalled another lunch party from before the war, not far from here. Everything was different then. The talk flowed, young, free, amusing, but a humming undercurrent ran through it, musical and exciting, changing the words, wait. Could I capture that hum? I opened a book beside me and found Tennyson singing. There has fallen a splendid tear from the passion flower at the gate. She is coming, my dove, my dear. She is coming, my life, my fate. Anne Christina Rossetti. My heart is like a singing bird whose nest is in a watered shoot. My heart is like an apple tree whose boughs are bent with thick-set fruit. Was that what people hummed before the war? The idea was so absurd I laughed, blaming the tailless cat, poor thing, looking odd without its tail. Was it born that way, or had it lost it? Tailless cats are rare, I mused, as the party broke up and guests hunted for coats. Thanks to our host, lunch stretched into the afternoon. The October day faded as I walked an avenue, leaves falling, gates closing softly behind me. Beetles locked up the treasure house for the night. I reached a road, its name escapes me, that led, with the right turn, to Fernham. Dinner wasn't till 7:30. After such a lunch, one could almost skip it. Poetry stirred me as I walked, Tennyson's lines singing in my blood. She is coming, my dove, my dear. Then Rossetti's, my heart is like a singing bird. What poets they were, I cried into the dusk, jealous of their age. Could we name 2 living poets as great? Impossible, I thought, watching the weir churn the water. Their poetry recalls feelings we once had, before the war, perhaps, while modern poets tear fresh emotions from us, hard to grasp, feared, or resisted. That's why modern poetry's tough, why I can't recall 2 lines of it. Why don't we hum at lunch anymore? Did the war kill romance when the guns fired in 1914, showing our rulers' ugly, stupid faces in the shell light? Whatever shattered that illusion, should we blame it or praise it for revealing truth? I missed the turn to Fernham, pondering truth and illusion, the festive houses dim in the dusk, raw and squalid by morning light. Which was real? No answer came as I retraced my steps. It was still October, leaves falling faster now at 7:23, a southwest breeze stirring. Rossetti's words tricked me into fancying lilacs and butterflies, though it was autumn. The gardens of Fernham lay wild and open in the twilight, daffodils and bluebells wind-tossed in the grass. The brick buildings' curved windows shifted from lemon to silver under racing clouds. A figure, humble yet formidable, stepped onto the terrace. Was it the great scholar J? They, herself, always dim yet vivid, beauty edged with anguish, until here was my soup. Dinner began in Fernham's great hall. It was October, not spring. The soup was plain gravy, nothing fancy. Then beef with greens and potatoes, a simple trio evoking muddy markets and curled sprouts. Prunes and custard followed, stringy and sparse, then dry biscuits and cheese. That was all. Chairs scraped back, doors swung, and the hall emptied. As a guest with no real place here, could I say the dinner was poor? No, that would pry into Fernham's brave front. Conversation stalled. A good dinner fuels good talk, I thought. One can't think, love, or sleep well without it. Beef and prunes dim the soul's lamp. Happily, my friend, a science teacher, had a bottle and glasses in her cupboard. We drew up to the fire, mending the day's wear. Talk flowed, marriage, failure, improvement, the oddities of our world. But a current beneath it pulled toward an image. Masons on a chapel roof centuries ago, kings and nobles pouring gold into the earth, then modern magnates laying checks where ingots once fell. I blurted it out. What lies beneath this college? Its red brick and wild grasses, its plain china and prunes? Mary Seton sighed. Around 1860, she began, rooms were hired, committees met, funds were begged. It was a slog to scrape £30,000 together. No wonder we lack wine and partridges. Amenities had to wait. We scorned our sex's poverty. What had our mothers done to leave us nothing? Powdering their noses, idling at Monte Carlo. A photo showed Mary's mother, a homely woman in a shawl, coaxing a spaniel to pose. If she'd made a fortune instead of raising 13 children, we might dine well tonight, exploring the world's venerable places. But wealth meant no Mary, 9 months of pregnancy, years of child-rearing. You can't let kids roam free, they say, and human nature forms early. What would Mary have known of Scotland's air and cakes if her mother had chased money? Useless questions, she wouldn't exist. For centuries, women couldn't earn or keep money. It was their husbands. Why bother, they might have thought, if every penny funded men's colleges? Our mothers managed bare walls from bare earth. That was their limit. We stood at the window, gazing at the moonlit city, its domes, towers, books, and quiet rooms. I thought of the luxury born of wealth and space, none of which our mothers gave us. Back at my inn, I pondered poverty's effect on the mind, wealth's too, and the traditions, or lack of them, shaping a writer. It's worse to be locked in than out, I mused, rolling up the day's crumpled skin, its arguments, impressions, and laughter, and casting it aside. Stars flashed across the sky as Oxbridge slept, and I slipped into my hotel, the door opening as if by magic, too late for anyone to light me to bed. Chapter 2. The scene has changed. The leaves still fell, but now in London, not Oxbridge. Imagine a room, one of thousands, with a window overlooking hats, vans, and motor cars, and other windows beyond. On the table inside lay a blank sheet of paper with the words "Women and Fiction" written in large letters, and nothing more. After lunching and dining at Oxbridge, a visit to the British Museum felt inevitable. I needed to strain off the personal and accidental from those experiences to find the pure essence of truth. That visit had sparked a swarm of questions. Why did men drink wine while women sipped water? Why was one sex so prosperous and the other so poor? How does poverty affect fiction? What conditions nurture art? 1,000 questions buzzed at once. But I needed answers, not questions, and answers lay with the learned and impartial, stored in books at the British Museum. If truth wasn't there, I wondered, picking up a notebook and pencil, where was it? So, armed and curious, I set out. The day was dismal, though not wet. Near the museum, streets teemed with open coal holes swallowing sacks, cabs unloading boxes, perhaps the wardrobes of Swiss or Italian families seeking fortune or refuge in Bloomsbury boarding houses. Hoarse-voiced men pushed barrows of plants, some shouting, some singing. London felt like a workshop, a machine, shuttling us back and forth to weave some pattern. The British Museum was part of that factory. Its swing doors opened, and I stood beneath its vast dome, like a thought in a giant, bald forehead ringed with famous names. I approached the counter, took a slip of paper, opened the catalog, and paused. 5 minutes of stupefaction followed. How many books about women are written in a single year? How many by men? Were you aware that women might be the most discussed creatures in the universe? I'd come with a notebook, expecting to capture truth by morning's end. But I'd need an elephant's stamina and a spider's eyes to tackle this. The titles alone fed my thoughts. Sex drew doctors and biologists, fair enough, but why did it also lure essayists, novelists, graduates, and men with no credentials beyond not being women? Some books seemed frivolous, others solemn and preachy. The titles hinted at countless schoolmasters and clergymen lecturing endlessly on this one subject, a strange phenomenon, and, under M, apparently a male one. Women didn't write books about men, a fact I welcomed with relief. Otherwise, I'd have to read all that men wrote about women, then all that women wrote about men, before even starting, a task too vast to finish. So I picked a dozen volumes at random, sent my slips to the tray, and waited among other truth seekers. Why, I wondered, doodling cartwheels on the taxpayer's paper, are women so much more interesting to men than men are to women? My mind wandered to the men writing these books, old or young, married or not, red-nosed or hunched. It was flattering, vaguely, to be the focus of such attention, provided it wasn't all from the infirm, until an avalanche of books crashed onto my desk. Now the trouble began. A trained Oxbridge student might herd a question neatly to its answer, like a sheep to its pen. The student beside me, copying from a manual, grunted with satisfaction every 10 minutes, mining pure ore. But I, untrained, watched my questions scatter like a frightened flock, chased by a pack of hounds. Professors, schoolmasters, sociologists, novelists, journalists, men unqualified except by not being women. My simple query, why are women poor, splintered into 50, then leapt into the stream and floated away. My notebook was a mess. Under Women and Poverty, I'd scribbled, Johnson's Mr. Oscar Browning S. I paused. Why, I jotted in the margin, does Samuel Butler say, wise men never say what they think of women, yet wise men never stop talking about them. Pope says, most women have no character at all. La Bruyere counters, women are extreme, they're better or worse than men. A contradiction from sharp minds of the same era. Can they be educated? Napoleon says no, doctor. Johnson, yes. Do they have souls? Some say no, others call them half divine. Goethe honors them, Mussolini scorns them. Everywhere men thought about women, and thought differently. It was impossible to sort out, I decided, envying the neat abstracts my neighbor made, A, B, C, while my notes rioted with contradictions. Truth had slipped away, every drop was gone. I couldn't go home with just trivia, less hair on women's bodies, or puberty at 9 or 90 among South Sea Islanders. My handwriting turned illegible. After a morning's work, I had nothing solid to show. If I couldn't grasp women's past, why bother with their future? Why consult all these experts on women's effects on politics, children, wages, morality? Their books might as well stay shut. In my despair, I doodled a face, Professor Von X, author of The Mental, Moral, and Physical Inferiority of the Female Sex **. He wasn't appealing, heavy-jowled, small-eyed, red-faced, jabbing his pen as if angry. That was my morning's yield, a caricature, not truth. Chapter 3. I returned from the British Museum, unsatisfied. My cheerful confidence had crumbled. Instead of writing a neat conclusion under Women and Fiction, I'd come back with a notebook full of scribbles and no answers. Truth about women and fiction, or even women's lives, eluded me. Back at home, I decided to shift my approach. Rather than chase opinions, I'd look at history. What were women's lives like in, say, Shakespeare's time? Could a woman have written those plays? I needed facts, not theories. I pulled a history book from the shelf, Professor Trevelyan's History of England. Turning to the Elizabethan era, I hoped for a clear picture. But what I found was puzzling. In Shakespeare's plays, women blaze with life. Cleopatra, Lady Macbeth, Rosalind, vivid, complex, commanding. Yet in real life, according to the historians, women barely existed. Trevelyan described an England where wives were mere shadows. A girl's fate was set, marry as her parents chose, often too young or face scorn. By law and custom, she had no will of her own. Her husband owned her, body and soul. If she defied him, beatings were routine, sanctioned, even expected. Wives appeared in records as property, not people. How could this be? In fiction, women ruled kingdoms, swayed fates, burned with passion. In life, they were locked away, voiceless, powerless. Shakespeare's heroines dazzled, but his sister, if he had one, wouldn't have penned a line. The contrast gnawed at me. I closed the book restless. History offered no women poets or playwrights from that time, just silence. But my mind wouldn't let go. What if Shakespeare had a sister? I pictured her, Judith, let's call her, born with his same spark, his same genius. What would her life have been? Here's how I imagined it. Judith's birth brought no celebration. Girls weren't prized like boys. While young Will roamed fields, watched plays, and slipped off to school, Judith stayed home, mending stockings or tending the hearth. She was bright, eager, her mind alive with stories, but no one cared. A quill in her hand was mischief, not promise. Will learned Latin, Ovid, Virgil, while Judith snatched scraps of his books in secret. She scribbled lines, hiding them from her father's wrath. He'd roar she was meant for marriage, not learning. Soon enough, a match was made, a neighbor's son, dull but steady. Will, meanwhile, chased poetry and London stages. Judith rebelled. Marriage repulsed her. She wanted freedom, words, a life like her brother's. One night she fled, reaching London's theater doors. She begged to act, to write, her voice trembling with dreams. The men laughed. A woman on stage? Absurd. Nick Green, some actor-manager, smirked, offered her supper instead, his pity laced with leers. Alone, her spirit broke. No school, no craft, no chance had shaped her gift. Pregnant by Green's false kindness, she sank into despair. One winter night, she ended it, buried now at some crossroads where buses rumble past, her name lost. Shakespeare's sister never wrote a word, I thought, staring at the page. Yet her brother's genius thrived, fed by education, freedom, the world's open doors. Judith had the same fire, but it flickered out, starved. I turned from my tale, shaken. History showed women's gifts crushed, not absent. Take Lady Winchelsea, born later, in 1661. Her poetry flared with talent, but rage and frustration scarred it. Married to a noble, she wrote in stolen moments, mocked by society for daring to think. Or Margaret of Newcastle, brilliant, eccentric, prolific, yet dismissed as Mad Madge, her works buried under scorn. By the 18th century, things shifted slightly. Middle-class women scribbled novels, their pens fueled by ink and spite. But even then, genius like Shakespeare's needed more: peace, money, a room to breathe. Women had none of these. Judith's fate haunted me. Her gift was real, but the world choked it. Could such a woman have lived and written? Not then. She'd have been warped by bitterness or broken by silence. For genius to bloom, I realized, it needs freedom, and women, for centuries, had none. Chapter 4. Judith Shakespeare's fate lingered in my mind. A woman with genius in Elizabethan England had no chance, her gift stifled by a world that locked her in. But what about later centuries? Could women write as time passed? I turned back to my books, tracing their voices through history. First, I found Lady Winchelsea. Born in 1661, she was an aristocrat, childless, with time to scribble poetry. Her lines shimmered with beauty. Nature's woods and skies lit her page. But bitterness shadowed her work. She railed against men who scorned her for writing, her spirit cramped by their disdain. Her talent burned, yet it flickered in isolation, unpolished by the freedom she craved. Then came Margaret of Newcastle, the Mad Duchess, born a year later. Wildly ambitious, she poured out plays, poems, philosophies, her mind a torrent of ideas. She dreamed of fame like Homer's, but her words sprawled, unchecked by discipline or training. Society jeered, her husband praised her, yet even he couldn't shield her from ridicule. Her genius was real, but raw, drowned in excess. By Fra Bain's time, things shifted. Born in 1640, she was no lady of leisure. Middle class, widowed young, she wrote to survive, plays and novels spilling from her pen. Her success cracked open a door. She proved a woman could earn her bread with words, not just a husband's favor. Men admired her, though some sniffed at her coarse tales. Still, her grit paved a path. By the 18th century, that path widened. Women like Fanny Burney scribbled novels in parlors, their inkpots busy. Then came the giants, Jane Austen, Charlotte and Emily Bronte, George Eliot. Their books weren't borrowed from men's shelves. They wrote as women, their voices distinct. I grabbed Pride and Prejudice and pictured Austen at her table, her sharp wit dancing across the page. No travel, no grand learning, just a quiet room and a mind that turned everyday life into art. Charlotte Bronte blazed differently. In Jane Eyre Asterisk, her passion roared, anger at confinement, hunger for more. She lacked Austen's calm polish. Her genius wrestled with a world too small for it. Emily's Wuthering Heights was wilder still, raw, elemental, like a storm breaking free. George Eliot, vast and deep, stretched toward philosophy, her novels heavy with thought. What struck me was this: none mimicked men. Austen hid her pages from guests, writing between chores. The Brontes poured their souls into cramped moorland rooms. Eliot wrestled with ideas in exile from society's norms. Their genius flowed from what they were, women, shaped by limits yet breaking through them. But those limits mattered. Take Charlotte Bronte, she ached for experience, for a wider world. Her letters seethed with it, I want to see more than this provincial life. Without money or freedom, her imagination strained against its cage. Austen thrived within hers, crafting perfection from a narrow frame. The Brontes and Eliot, though chafed, their books jagged with that struggle. I wondered, what makes genius bloom? Men like Shakespeare roamed free, schools, roads, theaters fed their minds. Women had parlors and duties, their pens snatched away by callers or chores. By the 19th century, they wrote novels because novels needed only a desk, not a fortune or a fellowship. Still, they lacked what men took for granted: space, silence, a room of their own. Then I thought of wealth's other gift, peace of mind. Men wrote with centuries of confidence behind them, their futures secure. Women scraped by, their days fractured, their nights anxious. Austen's clarity, Bronte's fire, Eliot's depth, all miracles born from scraps of time and borrowed calm. I imagined giving them £500 a year and a locked door. Austen might have smiled and kept her neat sentences. Charlotte could have roamed Europe, her rage softened into richer tales. Emily might have forged stranger, freer worlds. Eliot could have breathed, her mind unfurling without haste. Money and a room didn't just buy paper, they bought the chance to think, to feel, to create whole. By century's end, women wrote more, their voices bolder. But the shadow of womanhood lingered. They dodged sentiment, proving they were just women, yet that dodge warped their work. True genius, I thought, forgets sex entirely. Shakespeare didn't write as a man, he wrote as a mind, vast and unboxed. Women, pressed to justify themselves, rarely reached that freedom. Still, the tide was turning. With each novel, each play, women claimed ground. Fra Bain's grit, Austen's grace, Bronte's fury, they built a legacy. Give them a century more, I mused, with cash and quiet, and what might they do? The thought thrilled me as I closed the books, their pages whispering of battles won and yet to come. Chapter 5. I'd traced women's voices from silence to song. Lady Winchelsea's stifled cries, Afrabane's bold plays, Austen's sharp prose, the Brontes, wildfire, Eliot's deep waters. Now I turned to the present. What did women write today, with more doors ajar? I reached for a modern novel, *Life's Adventure* by Mary Carmichael, her first book. It sat light in my hand, its pages fresh. No centuries of tradition propped it up, no oak-paneled study birthed it, just a bedsit perhaps, with a typewriter and a kettle. I opened it curious. How did this new voice sound after Austen's elegance and Bronte's storm? At first, I bristled. Chloe liked Olivia. It began simple, abrupt. Jane Austen's sentences flowed like streams. This jolted like a pebble skipped across them. I couldn't preen over my fine taste when Carmichael broke the rhythm I loved. She didn't build to a grand crisis either. Love or death didn't crest as expected. Instead, she twitched me along, hinting the real point lay just ahead. My usual phrases, elemental feelings, depths of the heart felt hollow. She dodged them, making me wonder if I was less profound than lazy, clinging to worn-out words. Still, I read on. She wasn't a genius, no fiery imagination like Emily Bronte, no brooding wisdom like Eliot. Her book might be pulped in a decade, but she had something her great predecessors lacked: freedom. Men were the enemy to her. She didn't rail against them or pine for distant lands from a rooftop. Fear and hatred had faded, leaving only a faint sarcasm, a wry jab at the other sex, not the old romantic swoon. Her mind roamed wide and eager, catching every sight and sound. Small things, buried things, lit up fresh. A plant in a pot, a glance across a room, she made me see them anew, wonder why they'd been overlooked. Her prose wasn't polished like Thackeray's or Lamb's. It stumbled, awkward at times. But it carried a rare quality. She wrote as a woman who'd forgotten she was one. Her pages breathed a natural ease, untainted by self-consciousness. That was her first triumph. She'd learned the lesson of being herself, not a shadow of womanhood. Yet sensation alone wouldn't do. Could she build something lasting from these fleeting glimpses? I waited for her to face a situation, to summon meaning from the drift of life. At last she did. Without fanfare, she wove half-forgotten moments, someone sewing, a pipe smoked, into a quiet scene. Suddenly I felt it, a view from the world's top, majestic and clear. She was trying at least. Bishops and deans, doctors and professors seemed to shout at her from the sidelines. You can't, you shan't, fellows only on the grass, ladies need a letter. But she leapt the fences, not stopping to curse or laugh. Hesitate, I thought, and you're lost. Jump, I urged her silently, as if I'd bet everything on her. She soared like a bird, though more fences loomed, and her stamina wavered under the clamor. For a first novel, scribbled in a bedsit, it wasn't bad. I closed Life's Adventure and pictured Mary Carmichael a century on. Give her a room of her own, 500 a year, and the courage to cut half she now crammed in, sentiment, clutter, echoes of old fetters. She'd write something better, I thought. In 100 years, she might be a poet. Her book joined the shelf, a small spark in the dark. Women's voices had grown, freer, surer, but they still wrestled with shadows of class and shame. Carmichael hinted at what could come, stories of courtesans and shopgirls, not just ladies in drawing rooms. She'd need a steady torch to light those lives, to laugh without bitterness at human quirks. Men's too, that spot at the back of their heads they can't see. I leaned back, musing. The greats Austen, Bronte, Eliot wrote from their core, limits and all. Carmichael stood on their shoulders, less gifted but less bound. Another century of rooms and pounds, and she might rival them, not as a mirror of men, but as a voice wholly her own. Chapter 6. Next morning, I stood at my window, watching London stir. Cabs hummed, pigeons fluttered, a plane droned overhead, all ordinary, yet oddly alive. My mind drifted back to Mary Carmichael's novel, its newness still tugging at me. Yesterday's tangle of women and fiction felt clearer now, though not fully unraveled. I'd seen how women wrote, from silence to defiance, from Austen's grace to Carmichael's stumbles. But one question lingered. What makes a book whole? Shakespeare's plays sang with a unity I craved, a mind at peace with itself. Women's novels, even the best, often jagged with anger or strain. Was there a way past that? I pictured two people across the street, a young man, a girl, stepping into a cab together. They moved as one, natural and unforced. That sight struck me. Male and female, separate yet joined, like two halves of a single mind. Perhaps great art needed that fusion, not man's voice alone, nor woman's, but both reconciled. Back at my desk, I mulled it over. For centuries, men wrote as if women barely mattered. Kings and battles filled their pages, while women's lives shrank to footnotes. Women, when they wrote, fought back, their pens sharp with resentment. Neither saw the other truly. But now, with Carmichael's generation, something shifted. She didn't hate men or beg their praise. She just wrote, her mind freer, less bruised. That freedom hinted at a bigger truth. The mind, I thought, has no sex, or shouldn't. In Shakespeare, I felt no man's voice thumping its chest, no woman's voice pleading its case. His genius flowed from a place beyond division, whole and luminous. Could women reach that too? I'd asked what women needed to write fiction. Money, a room, ID said. But there was more. The world's clamor, its scorn, its locks, had to quiet. A writer's mind must be clear, not clouded by grudges or fear. For women, that meant shedding centuries of slights, not wielding them as weapons. For men, it meant dropping their old swagger, their need to loom large. I imagined a future where minds met like that cab's passengers, equal, unguarded. Literature might bloom then, not as men's or women's, but as human, vast, and unbroken. Carmichael was a start, awkward, yes, but stepping toward that harmony. Give her time, rooms, pounds, and she might write something to rival the greats. My thoughts turned practical. You asked me to speak on women and fiction, and here's what I'd found. A woman needs 500 a year and a room with a lock to write. But she needs more, a mind unshackled from sex, from I'm this, you're that. Only then can fiction breathe, its truth unwarped by division. I glanced at the shelf, Shakespeare, Austen, Bronte, Carmichael. Their books stood like stepping stones across a river, each nearer to that unity. The poet who'd write what Shakespeare did, but as a woman or beyond womanhood, might be alive now, I thought, her mind stirring in some attic or flat. Outside, London pulsed on, vans, voices, lives weaving together. I let my notes fall, my task done. Fiction wasn't mine to make here, just to ponder, to urge forward. Give her the tools, I whispered to no one, and she'll come. Judith Shakespeare reborn, her song at last her own. At the end,